Yeah, my name's Anne-Marie Culhane, and I have an eco-social practice which mostly takes place in outside of gallery and museum contexts.
So Russell and I, Russell Denman and myself, Eleanor Goulding, are collaborative artists, and we're based in Sherborne in Dorset, and we work together mainly on public commissions at the moment.
Okay, hi, I'm Nayan Kulkarni. I've been making art in one way or another since the early 1990s.
My name's Hugh Locke, and I'm trying to stay sane in lockdown. I'm an artist. I'm a sculptor, I suppose, but then I do paintings and I do photography as well. So yeah. I do a lot of different things.
The first public art commission that we won or were selected for is in Cumberland Place in Southampton, and it's a courtyard concept. So it's a really big project. It's our largest project to date. It's put us sort of out of our comfort zone, which has been really interesting because that's where we've developed a lot of learning and pushed into new ways of working. So we proposed 6 wildlife pods based on the poppy seed forms of the wildflowers found on the site. Yeah. So yeah, we proposed we did some watercolor drawings and sketches of how they might look, and yeah, so that one's carved oak, so very different to so it's working with wood, which is Russell's kind of training and comfort zone. It's kind of been a project that has appealed to lots of different people and has been really sort of unifying. So it's really interesting to hear what people think about things, and it's really nice when there's something that appeals to lots of different types of people.
That landing crew I was just going to talk about, which is something I've been doing for the last since last October, which I would say it's been quite successful and fun, and is part of so it dovetails in with the Extinction Rebellion actions. It's an independent thing though, and it's it's a performative street-based piece around many different things, but primarily it's looking at getting people to just look at their relationship to flying and the impact on the climate, but it happens within the context of protest. So it has a real impact on the field or the public space around it. So when we've done it in context of people getting arrested, or it's like the city airport, or even Trafalgar Square, it really changes the atmosphere of what's going on. It's quite calming, it's quite reflective, but it's quite powerful. The feedback from people that have done it is that it just gives them a really different way to be in a protest situation, which is quite nourishing, but also it's got a very strong visual aesthetic.
I guess my practice is characterised by a kind of research interest in a kind of moment in time or place. Place might be a single person, dead or alive, might be a person I've met, might be a town square. Well, I guess, I suppose the first public artwork I made would have been at college in my first year undergraduate, because we've got very tiny little studios, and obviously we're first years, so you don't get much space. Some of the first public work I made was actually infiltrating the building, the art school in Birmingham, so I used turmeric and chili powder, and I kind of working, I suppose after thinking about Richard Serra's lead corner pieces, I kind of started to think about how the building and a kind of gestural sculpture could start to function.
Public art projects I've done started with Ruined in Bristol, a collection of grave markers for dead or seriously ill in trouble companies. I did a piece in Soho, on a hotel in Soho called Celine, and it's a female figure, a kind of a sort of a giant winged woman, Art Deco-y, Art Nouveau kind of inspired, but really inspired by drag queens in Soho. So that was the kick for that for me. Done did the memorial sculpture for the 800th anniversary of the sealing of the Magna Carta document in 2015. Because there were two ideas, right? One idea was of a giant Lady Justice statue. And this was sort of inspired by Doreen Lawrence.
Okay.
And that was going to be quite big. But then an extra piece was going to be the chairs. The simple idea, you know.
Yeah.
A jury room, 12 jury members.
Yeah.
And these chairs are around, these bronze chairs are around an imaginary table. And that just came to me as like, oh, this is such an obvious idea. But it was helped by discussions about what a need for something interactive.
Yeah.
And that was good to have those kind of conversations. And then then the idea just seemed simple and obvious, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes the simplest ideas are the best ideas.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of my public art stuff is quite simple. At times it can be very different to the stuff I do in galleries.
Yeah.
But for me, it's about what works in this particular context.
Yeah.
Participation through dialogue is great. I think when you're actually physically doing, making, participating, passing around a bowl, it's another whole level of connection, and I don't know, memories get made that way.
Yeah.
How much do we remember an exact conversation, but we remember something we've done.
Yeah, and I quite often think, you know, sort of, the people are wanting permanent artwork still, you know, that kind of thing of permanence and it being there for a certain length of time. But actually, from my experience, the temporary projects that I've worked on have created the, you know, sort of often the biggest kind of reaction with people, or the you sort of have these really strong, vivid memories of something being in place which is not there anymore. And yeah, there's kind of acts of sort of, with people gathering and being there for a particular event or something. I think there's real potency within that sort of temporary kind of space for people.
Yeah.
Permanent is a very wide scale.
Yeah.
Permanent does not necessarily mean it's got to last for 100 years. Not at all.
It's quite often 10 years for some reason.
Exactly. 10 years is permanent. I was like, so I was like, oh, this is good. You know, this is okay. But what made this project work is having an intermediate body.
Yeah.
I wasn't dealing directly with the client. And I think for artists working in the public sphere, unless you're a major person who always does public art stuff, then
you have to have so many hats, don't you?
You have to exactly. It took me hours. So you really need to work with somebody else.
So most of the work that I get is repeat work from people that work with me once and then commission me again.
Process, yeah.
So, for example, with Take Apart, I worked with them for probably 4 years. We kept doing projects once I'd done a project, and other funders, the same things happened.
Yeah.
They tend to want to either try and continue the project that we're doing because they can see it's being successful, or they work with me to find other funding.
Yeah. We sort of realised that the most important things were our relationships with people, and maintaining those and sustaining those and making strong, good connections with people, and that's how things have happened for us. I think
quite often artists feel that, you know, who are not working in this area or who are perhaps just starting out, that I think, you know, your websites and all those kind of other things are really important as well. But I think, you know, it's that kind of connection to people and word of mouth. Actually, a lot of my work has come through that as a freelancer since becoming freelancer.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of have to find where you fit in, and you have to get to know a place and get to know the people there. I think absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if you've got a relational practice, then actually you kind of want a relationship with your funder as well. So it's much better for me if the funder wants to engage in some way, even if it's just coming to the odd event to experience what's happening. If the funder is at arm's length and they're wanting a kind of product with a clear parameter, that's possible. They're probably not going to get that from me. So I'm not, it's kind of the antithesis, I guess, of placing in a piece of work that's one thing, that's one person's interpretation. I'm trying to be a lens or a siphon for lots of different perspectives, and not offer a definitive definition of what that space is. Dialogue doesn't automatically happen well at all, particularly in public space. So we kind of got people to sign up to it and agree to these really, I think, great methodologies, tried and tested, which enabled people to speak much more from their own place of truth and less confrontationally. So I think that's another, it comes back to my practice. That some of the projects that I've done I've intentionally created sort of models or designs that people can then take. There's not a sort of, there's an open sourceness to sharing learnings, to sharing findings.
The worst kind of public engagement is where you have to do it because it's a condition of a planning discharge. Which is evidencing an invisible process, which costs money and time, is ultimately cynical. But it's not cynical on behalf of the delivery team or even the local authority. It's cynical in relation to a kind of whole idea of politics and engagement. So in those situations, one is just dragged along the kind of lowbrow idea of how communities can be involved in their public spaces. And you don't have a choice because it's a legal requirement. And obviously somebody's spending quite a great deal of money on something that actually it might have possibilities for social engagement. So you really do have
right way. Absolutely.
The problem with public art and what puts people off is quite often it's in the crappiest of locations. You know, art is the thing which is going to come and save the world. Either crap location or an amazing location which is so very, very tricky to deal with.
Complex.
It's never bloody easy.
No.
So it becomes what I often refer to when I'm talking to other artists, it becomes like a very difficult jigsaw puzzle. Not jigsaw puzzle, a difficult crossword. Like a serious cryptic crossword thing, but not just one, a whole crossword where you're trying to put the whole thing together.
Well, I think Cabot Circus is super interesting because it's right at the heart of the tension between different kinds of public practices. In relation to what situations were doing, what was going on in the St Paul's district, and then circus media, circus training. And then how different kinds of sort of inform, and of course the Arnold Feeney, so this relationship between sort of, I wouldn't call them global capitalism, but it's because it's land security. It's like super English capitalism, but this idea of two sort of FTSE 100 companies rethinking a cultural milieu around sort of retail, and then it's literally surrounded by a whole series of forces which kind of oppose that kind of hegemonic, sometimes demonic sort of adhesion to the city. But those tensions are really interesting. So the City of Culture. So one thing that it seemed to me when Hull decided to go for it, it seemed to me that nobody else had a chance. because the city itself seems to be, it's like, well, it's almost like this is the perfect city to do this.
Yeah.
And their approach was brilliant. I mean, it did all the right uplifting things. Even their promotional video, it kind of coached some of its kind of political critique, but it was all there if you look for it. They didn't hide anything. They just didn't underline it with a great big marker. So there's this kind of like super diverse images, which I think they overplayed later on in the process, but at the beginning it was just like these people in Hull.
Yeah.
So, but of course, the relationship between Blade, City of Culture, and that meeting in the bar was the first meetings were, so Hazel and Andrew were the curators of the Look Up program.
Yeah.
I've been involved in a conversation with those two professionals for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
So I think the conversation could have been Hazel and Andrew said, "What do you what springs to mind when we say made in Hull?" It grew from there.
Yeah.
But it also came from lots of other concerns. I mean, it wasn't. But it's also important to remember that I was involved in the vision documents for the new public realm improvements in Hull, which means I had an intimate understanding of the streetscape. All of those things, unrelated projects.
Yeah.
I knew it fitted.
Yeah. Yeah.
I knew where I put it. They just didn't know I knew where I put it.
The important thing is for somebody who's thinking of going into public art, just because you've never done public art before is not the reason to go, oh, that's not for me.
Yeah.
The reason to go, that's for me, is because quite often it's a guaranteed budget. Money has been set aside, and you're not having to sell a piece of work. You're having to sell your ideas to people. You're not having to sell a piece of work. So this is clear cash coming in. You know, basically, bottom line, it means you can pay your bills.
Yeah.
You know, as simple as that. Yeah. And that for me was the reason I got involved.
Yeah, I mean, what can be helpful is if you do, I mean, you could do it, sometimes it's useful to do a pilot. So you can, if you need to, so much of my work is, you have to be part of it or to observe it or witness it to understand how it's working and how it's impacting in place and with people. So and one way to think about doing that if you're approaching it for the first time is just to do a small version of what you want to do and just allowing people to see what that opens up. And to seed something. And also you get so much feedback from doing a pilot. It can be really useful if you're entering a new form of practice to try something out without the pressure of it being this kind of 1-year project or something big or your first big commission.
Absolutely.
They got to give the job to somebody. So just because you look at it and you think, well, this is not for me, but you might be interested, still go for it. And if you've never done it before, still go for it. And I suddenly thought today that one way of just working out whether public art stuff is for you is work out an imaginary public art project. Don't spend endless time on it, but work out an imaginary public art project and look into how this thing would work practically, how it would work conceptually, and then work with ideas of how much do you think this would cost. If you're lucky enough to find somebody who can give you a budget on something, that or just look into budgets and have a vague idea as to what budgets are. Talk to you, for example, how budgets work. Because that gives you an edge when you come. That means that when you see something advertised and that such a building or such other council is looking for something, you're not completely intimidated. Somebody who's just starting out, you'll have an agent going, you know what, this person is unknown, but this is such a great idea. You know what I mean? Let's give it to them, and we know that will actually, all of a sudden, they'll go from nothing to something.
Yeah, putting in the groundwork beforehand, making sure that that you can try and negotiate as much research time as you can within your commission. I guess just put the time, I would definitely put the time into building some relationships, which means just getting to know people as people.
Yeah.
So I think that's what underpins all of the most successful projects that I've done, is that there's people in those projects that like each other.
Yeah.
And we are still in contact even if we're not working together. So there's a humanity, and it's not about a transaction. It's beyond that. And that comes from, I guess, curiosity about people. So make sure you've got that.
Have integrity in your ideas, so sort of following your own interests and ideas, and then seeing what opportunities might align with that, and building relationships with organizations and people in your local communities, just sort of making those relationships and connections with people, and to keep making work that feels like it's yours.
Yeah, just being really respectful of existing relationships that exist in the place.
Yeah.
The place itself.
Yeah.
And people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, what is a week? What is a week for this kind of artist? This week is when I can be bothered every week is Monday morning do your accounts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Tuesday morning do your accounts.
Yeah.
And Wednesday morning do your accounts. So there's a meeting. I don't do it every day, but
you're regularly on top of that aspect of it.
The administration of a studio, whether it's my first one was the dining table. The administration of that space means it, for me, is really, really important. I'm pretty chaotic and random in pretty much everything I do, but that administration, and however boring the contracts are, read every bloody line. Every line. Because lots of them are cut and pastes of good practice, but sometimes they don't make sense, and sometimes this could be a £500 project. This could just be a couple of days, a day's rate and some material budgets. And if the contract doesn't say what you're going to do, you're not having it's respect between people. Unless you've got a private income, how do you invest that time? I mean, I could be writing something, doing some video. I could be taking some video. I can do that. I'm prepared to invest my time in that. But why would I invest time in you if you're not investing that little bit of time in me?
Yeah.
And that speculative idea stuff does sometimes lead to great works, by the way, obviously, life's life. Yeah. But in terms of life and practice, it's dangerous because I think the power is not equal.
Yeah.
If you're an artist and you're working in public realm, right? And it's an important piece. You will have public consultation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If people don't like it, don't automatically dismiss them as idiots. They may be wrong, but listen to what they've got to say.
It's about having a debate and to discuss.
Have a debate and have a genuine debate. Don't be patronizing to people. And I think that's where public art projects, if you're into research, right, it can be really quite exciting.
Working in the public realm now is getting, I would say, more and more challenging because, and it may be more so after COVID, because of all the people that I work with are under such massive pressure. They're overworked. They can't do their job anyway. This arts is so often seen as an add-on.
Yeah, the expectations and pressures, I think,
are huge. So basically, so now, for example, Environment Agency, they contract and subcontract. So I'm not even talking to the Environment Agency anymore. I'm talking to a subcontractor who doesn't even know who I am.
Yeah. Which I think makes a real big argument, you know, so much for that person that can kind of, you know, work with you as the artist and kind of support that dialogue and enable you to do what you have been asked to do, you know. So I think, yeah, I think you're right. I think it is getting very difficult. And I think there's also that thing of, oh, we need to have we've got money and we're being made to put in an art project in these spaces and sites and developments, but you know, the people who are, you know, they're not wanting to do that. They don't understand those processes, and yeah, they're sort of leaving it to the last minute, and then they're sort of, you have to turn a project around in 3 months and with the smallest of budgets, and that's absolutely needs to change, I think.
And I think again with public art projects, you have to develop a certain level of patience, because you have to accept that this thing is a process.
Yeah.
And that's fine, you know. As long as you're making sure that you're getting paid for your design, your upfront design, then okay. But then accept the fact that there will be lots of debates and discussions along the way, even for a small project.
Yeah.
Because you have to talk to the architect. You have to talk to an engineer, possibly, you know.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think personally, I kind of feel that kind of the producer role, or kind of the role that probably Claire took on in that process, I think it becomes a conversation, doesn't it, between
completely
and a kind of development. You know,
exactly, you're working together on something. I mean, my name's on the thing.
Yeah.
But you are working together in discussion on it, because if you're fighting with the people who are the producers, then you're going to end up with rubbish, or either that or you're going to have a heart attack. And even if you're very young, you could still have a heart attack.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's a really interesting way of working in public space, because you have the integrity of your idea, but then you can't just go and necessarily place a piece of work in a place and expect it to work. It kind of, you work with lots of inputs and limitations, so it's interesting to put all those together, and it's sort of like a puzzle that you can think, what am I working with here, what components have I got, because you've got the interest of the public and the interest of the commissioner, then the interest of the developer, and then your integrity as an artist to consider. So it's kind of, I like that way of working, because I like the restrictions in a way, and kind of coming up with a solution, and so it's been we've really enjoyed it.
But yeah, it's that sort of, it's not straightforward, is it, in public space? It's sort of, you know, winding and adapting and sort of kind of responding to the unexpected, I think. Makes it really interesting, but quite stressful at times sometimes.
The super exciting thing is, how do we rethink 50, 100 to thousands of years of thinking about urbanism, the politics of surveillance, the politics of the Membe's necropolitics? Can help us start to understand what a kind of civility might be in urbanism, and how it completely transforms urbanism. So it perhaps opens up opportunities for artists that just haven't been interested. I think it's a super interesting time for all sorts of practice to involve in a debate. The physical manifestation of space, on the other hand, is more problematic. The piece of work that's not in a gallery for the one has always interested me. So the speaker in the woodland, well, the sound source in the woodland, which can only be heard by one person randomly, is a kind of piece of work that starts to have more currency, perhaps, or more possibility. This is not for a massive crowd. This is for time.
Yeah.
And the idea of semi-permanent is a decade where the work is engaged with by one person a week. Over an entire landscape becomes much more possible as a way of engaging in place and time art. So that also opens up a whole other set of practices. But what really worries me is that I'm going to try and do this now. This format then becomes the dominant medium through which artists communicate.
Yeah,
Not necessarily a problem,
it worries me greatly as well, because as although I'm using this as a tool to continue my practice and my work, because there isn't an alternative really, but I, as a producer, curator, I have not actually been very engaged as a kind of audience member to all the programs that have suddenly gone into a digital world. I found that really hard, actually, trying to kind of maintain a contact with your family and friends, trying to continue your work, and then somehow still maintain your kind of your own learning through that digital world as well. My reaction is to go outside. You know, my garden has been, you know, the thing that I want to engage with, the kind of the park at the bottom, at the exploration of the place on my doorstep, that I've found places I never known exist before. That's what's attracted me during this. And it's a very particular time. It might not be so intense as we kind of start to move out of this kind of period, but I find it very troubling, especially when you then have, you know, your key funders like the Arts Council sort of really encouraging in that way of engaging, in that way of programming as well. And
they're very quick, though. That's the bit that surprised me. It was like, can you please reflect upon how you're feeling about the current political and biological situation of the planet and how that might reflect on your practice? Like, good grief. Any space for reflection?
Yeah, the quickness, the kind of, right, we have to, it's like, can we actually not stop and actually for once with all of this time again? Like, because I'm not in any kind of space, and I don't think a lot of the, you know, the artists that I'm friends with and work alongside are in any kind of state to kind of process this properly yet. And yet artists are being asked to justify themselves in this particular way when they're in a kind of situation of actually worrying about their own livelihoods and their family.
I mean, it's very, they say, you know, it's where we're all in common. It's like, what on earth am I going to be doing in the time? What do I need to sell? What can't I sell? What do I actually need to make work? People.
Yeah. It's kind of more interesting now, more than ever. It's how work will be in these public spaces going forwards. I think it's definitely given us more space and time to think about how we want our lives and work to be in the future, and looking at sort of more sustainable ways of doing things, and our approaches to, you know, for example, like we'd like to live and work in the same place and use cars less, and, you know, just kind of looking at adapting our practice so that we can achieve the things we're working towards. In particular with wood and ecology at the moment is something that we feel really interested in. We'll be looking out for things that are connected to that quite closely, and hope, you know, see what comes out of that.